Are you a home grower looking for a little bit of help? Are you ready to learn as much as you can about your favorite hobby? The Homegrown Helpers brings you informative interviews from experienced growers that have taken the next steps in their journey and decided to help you grow top quality cannabis all in your home. Now welcome in our host, Rob Smith, along with this week's Homegrown Helper.
And welcome to another great episode of the Homegrown Helpers. Boys and girls, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to be joining you and helping you take your grow education to the next level. Again, this is Rob Smith, the host of the Homegrown Helpers, producer of our parent podcast, if you will, Growcast with host Jordan River. I'm going to try and make this quicker today. I have been running a little bit long just because we've had so much going on here at Growcast, the Homegrown Helpers, and our membership program, GrowPass, with everything being open and ready for you to join in again. If you listen to any other episodes recently, you've already heard all the benefits of the program. Today we're going to go over some of our partners and what they offer you. But if you're hearing this, you only have maybe like less than a week left. 5-6 days, maybe. I think we're going to close on April 15th, 14th, something like that, somewhere around there. So you have 4 or 5 days to hop on over to mygrowpass.com, grab your membership, join us for the next couple of months. And we're offering 25% if you join us for 3 months to help you get through this quarantine. Speaking of quarantine, I really hope that you're doing your part to hashtag flatten the curve, but also hashtag get Rob out of the house. More importantly, get Rob back to doing things on a normal day-to-day basis, just like everybody else in the world. So do your part, stay home so that we can all get out and get life back to normal sooner than later. So today I have on the line Greg. Greg is joining me from Michigan and has grown cannabis on and off for a really, really long time. And this interview is long and doesn't get into great depths on grow advice. And I will apologize for that, only because this was one of the first interviews that I did with the new format. And I just didn't do a great job at bringing the best out of Greg. And I've gotten better, with the consultants. They were ready to give grow advice, and I've gotten better at asking the right questions and really digging deep. But this episode is loaded with stories and theoretical advice, an overarching theory to growing, not practical, like step-by-step instructions. But Greg shares some amazing stories and tales from growing cannabis for many, many years. So, give it a listen. I'm sure you're going to learn something. I'm sure you're going to like it. Today's episode is brought to you by my product, Atlas Plant Trainer. You can find it at atlasplanttrainer.com. A couple episodes ago, Sativa Steve gave us a great review, and I can't say much more other than what he said. It's a click-together, customizable tomato cage that helps you easily maximize your yields and grow plants to the exact size, shape, and dimensions that you want. So check us out at atlasplanttrainer.com. Use code GROWCAST and save yourself 10%, or members of mygrowpass.com, save yourself 25%. And I did go a little bit longer than I wanted, but I just do need to mention a couple other things. We're doing new giveaways. By the time you hear this, we're going to be on Michigan Made Mix. We have a bunch more coming up. We have Trim Bag, we have Fish Head Farms, we have Greencraft Distribution. A lot of our partners are giving you guys, just our listeners. So head on over to linktr.ee/growcast. Find the link in our bios on Instagram. growcastpodcast.com/giveaways. All the stuff, everything we're doing right there. Just check us out. We're doing a ton of stuff for our listeners, our members. We love you guys. Let's kick it into this interview with Greg from Michigan. And welcome to the show, everybody. This is Rob with another episode of the Homegrown Helpers. Since we've switched things up here with the format and I'm not just interviewing consultants, I have had such an amazing time connecting with these growers, and today is not going to be any different. I have Greg from Michigan on the line. Welcome to the show, Greg.
Hi, nice to meet you.
And Greg and I have been chatting up for about 15 minutes already. And Greg has a ton of stories and knowledge to share with all of us because, he's got 50 years of growing experience under his belt. I don't talk to many people that have that much experience. So I'm interested to hear what Greg has to share with all of you. And let's get to it, Greg. So, Greg, tell us a little bit about yourself and, a little bit, because it's a long history, but a little bit about your history with cannabis.
Well, I was a young teenager in 1969, and of course, Woodstock was happening, and we were all excited. I was only 15 at that time, I believe, and I was looking at a comic book of all things that we would get in those days, and it had a little tiny ad at the back, like they would for all kinds of products. It said, "How to grow marijuana." This was set my blood rushing, so I ordered this little brochure, which arrived in our mail. My heart pounding, so my mom and dad didn't see it. And we had bag seed, of course, from early days. And I was off and running and put them in my parents' yard, not realizing how large they get outside. This was outside Chicago in those days. And that summer, they didn't recognize what they were, and they never really flowered because of not having photo period. We didn't know very much. Even the little brochure we got was unclear about photo period. But it was a beginning. And then we started to, enjoy. Everybody had smoke in those days. It was a whole different culture then, as people may recall or even read about. And started growing a little bit. And then would travel. I was engaged in a profession for many years that brought me to travel around the world to various countries. And each one, of course, I'd seek out, if possible, finding where the smoke was. And then started to experience incredible plants in countries overseas, like India, for example, when I was a teenager, also Sri Lanka. They would have beautiful cannabis. But even then, we felt the heavy hand of the American authorities, because when you travel, you'd make contact with somebody in a village or a town, and they'd be frightened to death like everybody here. You'd go see their plants or see what they were doing, get some smoke, experience their culture. And then in the background, you'd hear, well, we have to, the government here has to attack it because the American government won't give them any foreign aid unless they agree to a cannabis eradication program. So this was going on with taxpayer money all over the world, really, unbeknownst, I think, to most Americans in those days. But that, got the ball rolling. And then after that, in the 70s, it was very bleak. I remember, although there started to appear very fine crops from Thailand, Jamaica particularly, that would land even at the high school level, that we were now seniors, high school, so freshmen in college. And these things were available and started to really come into the country pretty rapidly and pretty easily. Then by the time Nixon became, he announced the drug war in 73, I believe, if my memory serves me. And then things started to change. And then from that period on, it was a little bit touch and go. And then we got into the Reagan era. And that was when they really started to not only crack down with law enforcement, but also to really try to change the culture, which I think we're all aware of now. And, fight back against alternative cultures and alternative ways of thinking in favor of the hyper-capitalism we enjoy today. And so then you come into the 80s, and this is when the business of it seemed to start. And I remember receiving the first catalog, which we'd seen in High Times. It was advertised from the Seed Bank in Amsterdam. And then in the following year, that would have been 85, I believe, 86. My memory serves, the Super Sativa Seed Club catalog came out. And that was a revelation, having those huge amounts of choices in those catalogs. And again, as many, I'm sure, people felt, I ordered trepidatiously a few seeds from that, got them into the Chicago area, and thought it was the biggest deal ever. And find out just a couple of years ago, Super Sativa Seed Club put out a little history, and that when they first received, after the first ad they had in High Times, they couldn't believe it because their mailbox in Amsterdam was stuffed with envelopes with cash. 15,000 people had ordered seeds. So that shows you already in 87, 88 by now, thousands were very interested in it.
That's awesome. That's an awesome stat.
Yeah. So it was fun. It was challenging, of course, but we were fighting, which I think a lot of people around today would understand, not only, the law, which is horrific and could ruin people's lives at a stroke, but also many people around us who had bought the reefer madness philosophy and believed it. And these were our contemporaries, the baby boomers. And so more than half of them did not want cannabis in their lives, in their communities, whatever it was. And that's when the era, which I think many people who will be listening would remember, that cigars and wine came in. If you recall, all of a sudden people couldn't carry a stash of weed, so they were carrying a stash of wine bottles. And I remember people coming to parties, you'd have to dig for weed, but there'd be 50 bottles of wine brought and cigars, and that was supposed to be the substitute, is how I looked at it, because everybody was now engaged in businesses and careers and had children, and they wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. So now we get into the 90s, and that was a very tough period. It seemed like it was never going to change. Under Clinton, the Army and other security forces redoubled their efforts at eradication around the country. The laws were so strident that, if you have a nice couple or a nice family, my goodness, who would risk it? Because they'd take everything you had based on the RICO Crime Act and treat normal, everyday people like they were mobsters from from New York or Chicago trying to run a racket. So these measures did in large measure seem to crush, the movement, as it were. And many of the people that were left standing were only really common drug dealers, I hate to say, who had the boldness to continue because the money was so great that, again, I don't know if you remember, Rob, but, ounces in 99 or 2000, I remember being in New York City and wanted to get some smoke. They were like $600 for what we would call diesel now.
Oh yeah, I graduated in 2000, and my friends went to, some of my friends went to college in New York City, and they were paying, $60 to $80 an eighth to have it delivered to them.
Yeah, that's right. We delivered. Yeah. They were the first. Right. Actually, they went back to the 70s because we went to New York after college to work and live there, and that was the beginning of the punk era, if people remember, where you had, all the punk bands, Debbie Harry, the Talking Heads, on and on, the Ramones. And that gave rise, of course, to lots of young people pouring into Manhattan, living there, living alternative lifestyles. And there was 2 services, I remember, that would deliver to you in New York. You're absolutely right.
Right.
And they had good smoke, but it was expensive.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that was another bit. So that didn't seem it was ever going to be legal or any kind of decent route for normal people to engage in this. And I even had stopped growing for a few seasons because I had a young child to raise and we had, life to live, and it became just too difficult. So then all of a sudden I think, and I have to say this, Rob, there's no question in my mind, being eyewitness at the time, that the cannabis movement leapt ahead because of the recession in 2008 and 9. Had it not been for that disruption of the upper classes, the moneyed classes, the people that ran things, they were terrified for a period. And it was in that period that their attention dropped. And they were so worried about all their own money and their lives, their companies, that they just stopped paying attention to it. It fell through the cracks for them, like many things did. And then it got a huge boost. And I remember coming to Michigan that winter of 2009 was that, I believe, 2009 or 10 maybe. And there were thousands of men and women without any employment. It was a terribly cold winter that year, standing over trash barrels, burning with trash to keep people warm, just idling about on the streets. And pot was now legal in Michigan, but only medically. And it was very rough, very big, bold thing to open any kind of center. But the police didn't bother with it, and they left it alone in the main. And it started to draw in more decent people because I remember thousands had nothing to do, so they volunteered their time to paint a dispensary, not even a dispensary, then they called it a care center, and hung around and were interested because people had time on their hands and they were worried because they had no money. So I think that was a big incentive for this thing to get jump started around the country, because it had fits and starts in California. Colorado, of course, was coming to life then. And then in 2011-12, I moved to Colorado specifically because you could work in this field now, and worked for a fine little company there in Colorado Springs, working in their grows and contributing what I did know of organics and, what it took to produce fine bud and the final analysis, which, as people are learning, is not such an easy thing. And spent a year there and then came back to the Midwest where I'm really from and moved to Detroit and started up with the caregivers operation and, joining in as best I could and helping others and make a living from it, but not, go crazy, but be realistic about what's possible based on my experiences living through the recession and how we all make so many big plans only to see often that those don't work and that we're now left with debts and, have to start over again. So I thought that's not a good option. So, do it slow and see what happens. It's still evolving so fast and changes all the time. I barely keep up with all the changes. And the main thing is to keep your eye on the ball of, growing things that you enjoy, that others will, that contribute something, that don't certainly contribute to contention and fighting, but to people getting along and having a little joy in this life. That makes sense.
Right on. Well, thanks for that, history lesson, if you will. I hope our audience enjoyed just a brief dash through the last 50 years of cannabis from your eyes. I'd like to get into some grow advice now.
For sure.
If the audience isn't aware, I ask all of our guests just to fill out a short, questionnaire, kind of an intake form to give me something to work off of. And, I was really intrigued by a lot of your answers, but this one really stood out. So I'm going to kick it off with this. I asked in the form, what's been the biggest failure in your garden? And the first time I read that out loud, I want to change that to, what's been the biggest opportunity for learning in your garden in your experience with cannabis? Do you remember what you put down on the form here?
I don't at this moment, but you tell me.
Sure. So it was failure to anticipate needed workflows in advance.
Right.
And failure to meet production schedules on time. And I was hoping that you could dig into those two a little bit about the needed workflows and maybe share with our audience some of that learning opportunity and where you've come out on the other side of that.
Sure. Well, I think coming to that specific point that people bite off way more than they can chew coming out of the gate, I think that's first. And they think they can, for instance, grow, 500 plants and just plant them and start growing them. That isn't going to work. You have to know, first of all, basic gardening techniques, which most people, to be fair, do not. And that's to be expected. How would they? They've never had an interest in gardens or growing food or vegetables or flowers. Maybe lived in urban areas, grew up in urban areas. So that's natural not to know. And that's the exciting part about getting people engaged in cannabis is that it acquaints them, of course, directly with all kinds of other valuable skills that they can apply to their own lives beyond just growing cannabis. But having said that, they have to set up a plan. This would be for professionals now who would realistically face, what a schedule is. In other words, you're going to have about 3 to 4 months between the time you start a seed and the time you have plants close or ready to harvest and flower. That's a big, big time frame if you're not used to doing it. And if you scale up, as I'm sure many are discovering and have discovered, now you kind of expand exponentially the potential for problems in your gardens. So I think having a careful, realistic plan to start, especially if you're not, if you're a novice, start small, start with a few, get the feel of the plant. It's one thing to study them and so on online or go to even symposia. It's a whole other thing to have to do it yourself. And where people drop the ball often is they don't pre-visualize. I think it's a big word to kind of emphasize that they don't pre-visualize what the final result of their efforts is going to be down the road. They myopically just go step by step. A problem occurs, they correct it or try to correct it, push ahead, and never really get to the end game with a higher end product that they could sell. I'm talking for professionals here, or sell at a higher price in the market because their end product will have suffered on the way to becoming harvested. And so you have to make a careful plan going in about how many plants you can handle, how many you can start safely and operate with, how you can see those through to completion, see all the different stages of their development in your mind. And that, of course, takes experience. So I say to the amateurs and the people who want to grow for themselves, be gentle with yourself. Don't make high demands on yourself. Don't aim for perfection. Aim for a good, solid product that you feel comfortable doing and smoking, and do it step by step. Be deliberate. Now, there's 100 ways. I've been told this, and I hear it all the time in the profession. 100 ways to start a plant, to clone a plant. That's true, but there's probably about 10 ways to do it really well. And that's the trick, is to know those ways. And it's not a secret method. There are no secret. The secret of all this is there is no secret, except hard work, application of effort, and a genuine interest in what you're doing. And I think if you have those components, you will succeed for yourself or even in a business. It's like any other business. It's long-term planning. It's realistic planning. You may be aware, Rob, the Canopy Holdings in Canada is a good example. This huge shareholder-driven, corporation, and they're not making money yet. That has to tell you a lot.
Not only are they not making money, but they're literally like bleeding millions of dollars every quarter. So.
Right. Because you see the waste. When I worked in Colorado, I couldn't believe the wastefulness of material alone. Like, I work organically. I worked in every other part of gardening and in hydroponics. And I've concluded after, say, 30 years more work that hydroponics is wonderful in California, and it's great for lettuces and food crops. I'm still of the opinion, having done it many, many times, that you'll get beautiful plants in hydroponics if you know what you're doing, but it's a very complicated methodology, very science-based, that requires a lot of attention to daily detail, i.e. labor costs. And at the end of the day, it yields probably 10 to 20% more. But the flavors and aromas and what people care about now, the terpenes, however you want to say it, they're lacking. And we've done one-to-one tests, same plant, same clone, same conditions, hydro, soil. Soil beats it every time in terms of flavor and aroma and the ability of the buds to hold their aroma and flavor longer. And I'm an expert in these things scientifically, but I just do it through observation. And so the organics works best. It's simple. You don't have to be spending hours and hours measuring, and it's also cost effective for the amateur.
Right.
And for the person who does it as a hobby or even a small business. I've run the numbers many times. For every $8 somebody spends doing this chemically or hydroponically or with the expensive old-fashioned lighting, HID, they're spending about $8 to our 80 cents. So I think the 80 cents makes better sense
right.
to pursue in a small business. I can't speak to all conditions and all markets. There's many ways to do this, that's for sure. I just know what works for us. and what has been successful,
Right.
and that you can maintain. The other thing is consistency. This is something that a lot of the pros are running into big trouble with. Okay, they have John X on crop Y. That crop does beautifully in August. It's harvested, it's cut, it's trimmed, it's sold. Everybody loves it. Now they do another run commencing in August, come late of October, November, when that crop is ready, hasn't measured up. Now they've got a problem because everybody wants that smoke, but they'll say, hey, this doesn't taste the same. That's a big deal in this business. You've got to be able to produce the same things and new things over and over again with consistent results for yourself in order to please the public and the patients.
Sure, sure. I think a lot of your advice is also very applicable to the home growers that listen to our show.
Absolutely.
I'm not sure how many true professionals. I know we have a lot of people aspiring or looking to get, a small craft license.
Sure.
So I think a lot of your advice, planning for the future and planning, like, envisioning what you want the end result to be and then working your way backwards. One of my favorite sayings as of late is failing to plan is planning to fail.
Right. Exactly.
Right. The more in-depth planning that you can do before starting, even a home grow. I talked with a grower from South Africa just a couple of days ago that I think you'll probably have heard the interview by now, but he had to order everything he needed from one place in the United States and have it air freighted over here. So he had to plan out everything for an entire room. I think he had 3 tents in that room. So he had to plan out everything he needed: clips, lighting, soil, and,
all the hundreds.
Right. He didn't have the ability to go down to the grocery store or order something off Amazon and have it delivered.
No.
Everything needed to be ordered, right out the gate. So that's really good advice. I did want to bring up something you mentioned that time after time, soil beats out hydroponics on, smells and flavors.
Quality, overall quality,
right.
Overall quality.
Right.
Absolutely.
I've been making the point with some friends of mine locally that, the strawberries in the summer versus the strawberries in the winter taste completely differently.
Correct.
And that's because the soils in the summer are harvested and grown in soil. And the wintertime strawberries are more often than not grown hydroponically.
Right.
And they have like 25% of the flavor as a soil grown strawberry.
Oh yeah, and they'll look just as pretty. They'll look sometimes prettier.
Totally. They're bigger.
Bigger, yeah.
Yeah. Bigger and brighter, just like our cannabis is typically grown hydroponically. Right. You can grow really big plants and harvest them, generally sooner because they grow faster.
Well, depending on the strain. See, again, a lot of the strains that are carried now, and I think people are beginning to learn this at any given dispensary in any state, are generally kind of homogeneous because all the growers want their plants to finish in 8 weeks.
Right.
And I even know people that push it. When I worked in Colorado, the guy was surveying the rows of plants at 7 weeks and saying, cut these down, we can sell them, because they needed them in the stores.
Right.
So you don't see that many growers, certainly professionally, that grow the more exotic strains, or as we would say now, the big word everybody's using is landrace, which, by the way, was a term invented in 1930, not invented, but used in 1935, originally in Denmark, for a scholar there who was describing pigs and swine and groups of swine. And he was, people may not know this, but in Denmark, pork is a huge deal. They make some of the best bacon. Any Danish pork product is always tops. So that to them, it really mattered which strain of swine were the original, dating back to the Vikings and so on. So that was where the term was first applied. And I would say particularly amateurs out there, there are definitely really cool land races becoming available that hadn't been before. And I can give some recommends later on where to find those. But they're genuine and they're worth pursuing, but no professional will. So that's a great area for your amateur grower who's a home grower and wants something who's really special for themselves and is willing to wait 12, 14 weeks for their bud, and they'll be rewarded at the end of that with a whole different experience of what marijuana is, what cannabis can do,
Right.
and how the effects are, that they're not just smoking homogenized, largely indica crosses that are, originally from skunk and northern lights, because that's what all the pros did. I mean, most of the seeds now, and I got this the other day and I looked it up, the guy was right. The bulk of professional seeds for all these banks are being made now in Spain by third-party, facilitators, like a third-party supplier. Because Spain's climate's fantastic for cannabis. They can produce millions of seeds that our people over here just can't provide the service for. So, they got to know where they're getting their genetics and know that. And most of the seed banks are very reputable. And this stuff you see online, the guy gave me dud seeds, or it's mostly down to the growers themselves who aren't adept at growing. There's some bad eggs, but most people, my experience has been for 40 years with the seed people, that they're generally very reputable and they want return customers and they're not ripping you off. But, to get the exotics are more interesting, I think, for your home grower, because certainly in Illinois and other states now where they can purchase cannabis, they'll get the usual stuff that's available. And then if they want to grow something special, they can do that themselves at home and really enjoy it.
All right, we are going to take a quick break to thank one of our partners at mygrowpass.com, bring in our listeners and our members some amazing discounts. Today, it is the amazing Dr. Zymes, one of our best partners. They've been with us since the very beginning of this venture, and they offer you premium, top of the line, all natural, pest, mildew, fungicide eliminator. You can use this stuff on seedlings all the way up through to harvest without fear of damaging your flowers. So when we started this, I'd never heard of the amazing Dr. Zymes. Patrick the Soil King was on Growcast, sung their praises, specifically about popping seeds. And he also had, I think, a dog that he used it on, something I forget. But we reached out to them and see if they wanted to partner with us. And ever since then, all we've heard is amazing things from guests, from people on Instagram, people that email into the show, just singing the praises of the amazing Dr. Zymes. It's the only thing that they use, the only thing that they have to use. So they offer the eliminator in a concentrate and a spray and their multi-purpose cleaner. We're specifically talking about the eliminator right now, but if you want to try either of those products, head on over to drzymes, ZYMES.com. Use code GROWCAST to get 10% off, or save yourself 25% off after you've become a member at mygrowpass.com. Now let's kick it back and continue with this great interview with Greg. Why don't we dig into some practical grow advice for our audience? We probably only have about 15 minutes left.
Sure.
And I want to make sure that we extract some of this 50 years of education. I know we've talked a lot about quantity over quality quality over quantity. But fact of the matter is we have a lot of new growers, new home growers that listen to the show. And, they're always looking to get just a little bit more out of their plant, whether they're getting 2 and want to get 3 ounces, or they're getting 4 and want to get 6. We have to think on those levels that we're trying to educate people from the very beginning stages here. So what tips do you have for those growers when they're looking to maximize the yield that they get off of the limited amount of plants that we can grow, whether that's, 2 in Vermont or 6 in Michigan?
Yes. Well, I think the first thing is you have to pick, if you want quantity at the end, in other words, you want to get the mythical 4 and 6 ounce plant, you have to use strains that are geared to producing that in the beginning. For instance, basic Afghanis, they'll produce far more. That's why people were hybridizing them. They'll produce generally more than a pure sativa, or something that isn't as productive. So you have to pick that. But I think if they really want to maximize what they have in a given space, in a tent or a small area, you'll have to also study and learn as you go training methods, as they're called, just to throw the names out there: super cropping, lollipopping plants. I don't want to go too much into the detail, but you know what I mean, of training your plants. And that in a small setting, in an amateur setting, is very viable because it takes time to bend and train and tie down plants and, prune them a certain way. And that will maximize for sure in a small area. Like, let's say you have a 3x3 tent or a 4x4, you can double your output at the end simply by training them in a very disciplined way, which is labor intensive, but worth it to the people who want to achieve that. And so any kind of training method is always efficacious. And on the other hand, for your average grower who's got a full-time job and kids and stuff to do, if you just plant them, tend them, prune them once or twice in a very basic way, lollipop the bottoms when they're when they're growing and they're going into flower. So you take all the small, kind of shoots away that they would produce, and just let them grow is really, I think, if you're just starting out, my advice is to just let the plant grow, to just study it at first, see what its characteristics are. Many strains are different from one another in how they're produced. I would say the average yield you could be happy with as a beginner, maybe 1.5 ounces, 2 ounces a plant of trimmed bud at the end would be realistic, and not to beat themselves up when they read these, again, I say largely mythical tales of, I got 14 ounces off a, 5-gallon pot. So some people, you can have a beginner's luck and you can do that. But most people are going to be disappointed, I would say, in what they're going to get, certainly the first or second time out. But if you keep at it and keep working, learn by your mistakes, study what your mistakes were, you can increase your yields. And I would say 3 to 4 ounces a plant of trimmed bud on average would be a realistic figure to achieve. But mainly patience and study, and keep it simple. I can't emphasize enough. People complicate this so much. I'll go into a grow shop and just shake my head listening to the conversations because they're almost frantic. And I'd say you got to relax. It's like any other craft or sport. You got to suck your breath in, relax a little bit, and then figure out, what you did wrong and how to rectify it. And then accept, if you have some beautiful smoke and you've only got 1 ounce, you made a victory. You got 1 ounce, you got yourself. Then go for 2 ounces, but be patient and don't be hard on themselves. But, learn and pick ways that they're comfortable with for them to grow.
Cool.
That's all I could really say.
All right.
The organics is what we choose, but that's because it's simple and repetitive and we can do it 1,000 times over. But, there's many ways to do this and there is no one way. So I'd say pick a method that you're comfortable with to start. And then you might be very satisfied.
So I wanted to give you an opportunity to dig into the question you said you wanted to go really deep on, and that would be getting a starting grow to thrive without spending a fortune or needing advanced knowledge. So I guess very, beginner type tips and starting a budget grow. So whatever you can share with our audience, go as deep as you want. This is probably going to be our last question for today, but I have a feeling that we'll be able to get you back on the line for a part 2.
Sure.
Because we still have a lot more to go over. But yeah, just go as deep as you want. Talk about starting to grow without an awful lot of money or knowledge.
Well, absolutely. I mean, I think you can, going back to the old days when there wasn't any fancy equipment or places to buy it, you can use a closet, a space under stairs, as long as you can seal it off. Of course, now the big thing, which I say is great, are tents, because you just buy the tents on Amazon or a grow shop. And, it's a predetermined space. It's definite. You set it up. It doesn't require hammering things or tearing down anything in your home. It's simple. So I'd say for those beginning, go online or go to your local shop. Many people now are offering grow packages, as they call them, that have a tent and the lighting and fertilizers and, all the little things you're going to need, the trim scissors, the fans. And they'll offer, I saw a really nice one offered on Instagram yesterday out of Chicago. I think it's good to give him a plug, Chicago Cannabis Consulting. Seems like a nice fella. And he's offering a tent, I think, pretty complete for like under $800 right now, which is a good bargain.
Yeah, that's our friend Rich, Illinois Cannabis Consulting. Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's the guy. Yeah, I follow him on Instagram. He's a nice fella. And he had it yesterday. And then the poor guy, and I know his pain. So he laid it out what the tent is and all the parts. And right away, there's guys going, well, what about this light? Or what about that light? And he's like, sure, you could use those, but here's the deal. And I think that's, don't overthink it if you're beginning. Get a package like that from some reputable person. And he said they have directions. I think he said he'd even come help people set it up in their home or office. So you can't beat that. I mean, that's great. And those are the kind of people that I think are admirable. And I do that up here, for free in Michigan. I'll help many people, what to buy, give them the list from Amazon, whatever. And then we'll assist them. Because again, you get all that gear in the boxes and it's like, what do I do now?
Right.
A whole other thing to set up. So, and it's a big deal. It's like an aquarium on steroids or any, very earnest hobby. It's demanding. And also the final thing to throw out is the, electrical costs to do it. And that's not insignificant. I would say in my mind, a tent, 3x3, 4x4 tent with everything humming away, you're looking at, 50 to 85, $90 a month added to your electric bill for that little facility. So you have to know that as well. But I definitely say to people, get LED lighting. Do not bother with, all of us have used and joyfully used the HID lighting for 40 years because that's all there was that would do it. I cannot emphasize enough. We've been working with and testing LEDs now for 6 years. They're clearly superior. It's a myth that they don't produce big buds or the white buds. That goes back 10, 15 years when people were buying 1-watt Chinese lights like you'd see in the windows at restaurants. And of course, those don't do anything but, sprout seedlings. So people left the LED, went back to HID, haven't realized in the ensuing 10 years that it's come an amazing way. And it costs 50% less to operate and has far less heat, far less effect on your plants. You don't have to dump that heat, which people find out quick is a big problem. And it's a better way to go. It's the future.
Yeah. So LEDs and tents for beginners. Any soils out there to try and keep it organic, keep it simple?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Mother Earth, I love, which is a product I think made out of Indiana of all places. Mother Earth products are fabulous right now. They're an organic soil coir mix, pre-mix. All they have to do is add a fertilizer to it, either wet or dry. Also, Roots is a company that's excellent. Those are generally available. Roots, and they produce, I think, 3 different organic soils.
Mm-hmm.
And those are good places to start because they don't have to mix the soil. They don't have to buy potting soil, which is not the way to go. That's for home gardens, not for cannabis. Because you got to get root penetration, as you may be aware.
Right.
So that all is important. Yeah. But keep it simple, and I'd say get it so simple that you get the 10 basic things you need in a kit. Start with that. See what's more is needed. Learn from it, and then add as you go, if you even need to. Maybe some people. I've watched it, Rob, all my life in the arts and now in this. Some people have what they call beginner's luck.
Totally.
And they can just buy equipment, set it up, seemingly without any experience, and have good crops right away. That's the exception, though.
Yep.
That's the exception. Most people will run into troubles, and that's okay. That's all human and all normal. Nobody's perfect.
So do you have any other advice specifically on budget grows and I guess maybe not being overwhelmed with the amount of information that is out there? It sounds like you have a pretty simple approach.
Yeah, I think that's what I've tried to do. I had for myself, too, is to keep it simple, go to places and don't set high goals right away. Think, if I can grow 4 plants from seed, and seeds, that's another thing. People, of course, many of the pros, they can't grow seeds to this day. That's why there's a huge market for clones. So I'd say get your seeds, get a couple of basic grow books. There's several good Ed Rosenthal's and Mel Frank books that are on the shelf, either at the grow shop or you can find them on Amazon. They have all of them. And, get 1 or 2 of those that you feel comfortable with, study them, and go from there. And then get your kit and set that up and, troubleshoot it. When we set up professional facilities, we'll set them up and running and let them run for a full week before we put any plants in there, just to see that there's no glitches with fans or failed parts, or, something gets stuck, or an electrical problem, which will happen. So to, troubleshoot for yourself so you don't have to lose time and spend money.
Cool.
And also the plan that if you're going to be away, you got to have somebody come and take care of your plants for you.
And, back to the original, mission of the Homegrown Helpers, when you do go away, make sure you give us a call. We can help you find a consultant that can help watch over your plants, that you can trust.
Wonderful. There you go.
So, Greg, we're about ready to wrap things up. Do you have any last bits of advice or wisdom that you'd like to pass along to our audience?
Well, I say in a broader sense, not to do with pot per se, but, be gentle with yourselves, be gentle to each other, have patience. This requires great patience. Develop those qualities. I think one of the great things that can come out of cannabis growing, certainly for people even years ago, was the irony of it, that the myth that people that grow and smoke cannabis are lazy and backsliding and shortcutters couldn't be further from the truth, in my experience, because in order to survive in this over these last decades, individuals had to be resourceful, disciplined, thoughtful, patient in order to avoid problems. And this led to the development of a very hard working culture that's actually sober and very alert to not only, now, of course, the old legal threats have pretty much disappeared, but now you've got to compete or you've got to produce something, and you have to be disciplined and thoughtful. And I think patience and kindness are highly needed right now in everything we do. And cannabis can be an example for that. So, encourage people to be more relaxed and be more thoughtful and kind to each other and not greedy for things. The other thing I've learned with this for sure over many years, those who are greedy and hasty always have problems and failures. Those who are patient, thoughtful, deliberate, consistent in their personal habits as well as their work have results and are happier in life, which after all is what it's all about, isn't it? In the end, how do we get happy? How do we keep that? And I think that's a huge thing we all need right now.
Cool.
And honestly,
what did you say there? I think I talked over you.
Well, being honest in your dealings with others and honest with yourself, because then you'll do better work.
Awesome. I think that's a great place to end. Thanks so much for your time today, Greg. Audience, all I have to do is ask you, if you enjoyed today's show, give us a rating and review on whatever podcast app you're listening to us on. It really goes a long way in helping us reach more people with this new format. And if you're interested, go and apply if you feel like you have a unique story to share, a perspective, something that you think every other grower out there needs to know. Find me on Instagram, The Homegrown Helpers, and there's a link in our bio. You can apply right there. Or just email me, thehomegrownhelpers@gmail.com. So thanks so much, Greg. Really appreciate your time. And I keep talking over you saying goodbye, so go for it. I don't know if there's a delay or whatever, but Greg says goodbye, everybody. Happy growing, and take care.
You too.